to get through this. This is the sysinternals primer, and according to the Ignite people, this is the Ignite 2105 edition. I thought it was the 2015. They put 2105. I fully intend to do one in 2105, but I have not started the deck yet. So see about it when we get there. So what is sysinternals? Sysinternals are a set of tools, right now up to around 70 or so. It was started in 1996 by Mark Russinovich and Bryce Cogswell, and they decided to make a bunch of free tools available to the world that were more powerful than anything that Windows was releasing to help diagnose and troubleshoot problems on the Windows platform. And we acquired their company. We acquired sysinternals and winternals in 2006. And they signed a contract with Mark and Bryce, and Bryce retired exactly 4 years and 0 seconds after that contract was signed. But Mark is still with the company and has moved on to become the CTO of Microsoft Azure. And he is the author of the tools, and he wants me always to mention, Aaron here does not write the tools, he writes the tools, so don't say, thank you, Mark and Aaron, for writing the tools, because it drives him nuts. But there are some other people who have been contributing major amounts of code in a few of the tools. ProcDump, Andrew Richards has contributed a ton of work. LiveKD, Ken Johnson has done that. And a new tool called Sysmon, which we'll look at today, from Thomas Garnier. But Mark is in charge of all of it and decides what goes in and so forth. So wait, let me go back to that a sec. So here's all these names: Mark, Bryce, Andrew, Ken, Thomas. My name's not on there at all. So who am I and what am I doing here? And this is where I come in. This is the official authoritative, this is a big heavy stool, the official authoritative guide to and reference to everything about the sysinternals tools. And if you look very carefully, you can actually see my name on the cover. I'll point it out for those in the back who probably can't see it. I'm sure some of you in the front can't either, but it's right here. There it is. And you can almost see it without an electron microscope. But this is the most complete and accurate guide there is. One little problem with it is still accurate. It's no longer complete because it came out several years ago. There have been a lot of new tools that have come, or several new tools that have come out since, and a number of new features. So we are working on a second book that will cover all those and a lot more. If you're interested, there's also someone published a Russian language version of this, and you can tell that it did not go through the Mark Russinovich approval process because our names are in the same font size. The Japanese, he was much more okay with. They got the font size, so Mark, that's Mark. He's very happy. This drove him bananas. As you can, this is the Korean language version, and as you can see, not only are the names in the same font size, but my name's first. And then, to make matters worse, I got it translated. The little white text underneath says, you know, Aaron Margosis and Mark Russinovich. Aaron is the smarter and better looking of the two. And I told that to Mark. I've never seen him so angry. So, new book, because there's some new tools. RU is a new tool that doesn't exist in the first book. It is the analog of DU, disk usage. RU is register usage. This has been out for a little while, but there have been some new features in the last year that I'm going to show today. PS Ping is not in the book. That is an advanced ping and bandwidth and latency testing tool that goes way beyond ping.exe. That will be in the book. And Sysmon is actually up to revision 3, which is new even since last year. So last year at Ignite 2014, I guess it was, Sysmon didn't even exist at that point. So I'll be showing that today. Major tool updates since then as well. Process Explorer has gone through numerous updates. How do you like the, I decided to jazz up the the thing with some stock authorized branding graphics. What do you think of that? So this is a guy, a young hipster, really digging access check on his little mobile there. And, sysinternals will be, fully social, right? So lots of integration with Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, or, depending on your age group, right? So like ProcDump, which is it's a utility, the utility for capturing the state of a process at a given point in time and saving it to a dump file, right? So ProcDump will gain this new capability to, when it runs and captures a dump file, it'll post to your Facebook and say, hey, I just took a dump. I'm so sorry. Of course, for some of you, I'm sure that's a normal post but when ProcDump is doing it like 20 times in an hour, you might have your friends being a little concerned, saying, hey, Taylor, you might want to cut down on the fiber a little bit. So Autoruns, sorry, I will not do that again. Autoruns has gone through major updates. SIGCheck and AccessCheck have also gone through major revisions. Those are all going to be covered in the new book. And there's some areas where we could have gone into more detail back when we wrote the first book, and we didn't. So Contig and Core Info, we just kind of glossed over what they did. And Process Monitor, the best tool for identifying what is happening on my computer, one of the things it points out is you can save a Procmon trace in XML format. And then you can do all kinds of automation and analysis on that XML using PowerShell or whatever you want to use. Right? And that's all we said is you can save it as XML. So in the new book, the XML schema will be fully documented, and there's actually 2 Casey Unexplains that demonstrate the use of those, including the app install recorder, which I showed last year and which is on my blog if you want to go find that. I did eventually post it to my blog. Casey Unexplained, this is the section in the back that's kind of modeled after Mark Rusinovich's great sessions where he demonstrates the use of the tools and other things, other troubleshooting techniques. In the first book, there were 3 chapters with 17 cases. The new book will have 45 cases across 6 chapters. And they are making fun of someone for hangs and sluggish performance in the graphic, as you can see. So what's been going on? So autoruns, this is what it's like writing a book, right? So autoruns, lots of updates to autoruns. So I get that all nailed down, completely in there, and then he goes and overhauls the entire thing. So let's have a look at some of what has been done in autoruns just since last year. This talk is primarily going to be about what has happened in the sysinternals world just since last year, so we don't have to repeat stuff from the past. So first of all, VirusTotal integration. It now integrates with VirusTotal. VirusTotal is a website and a web service that you can query and say, hey, I've got these files. Do you know anything about them? What do the antivirus engines in the world say about this? And it'll give you back, X number of antivirus engines say that there's a problem with this, or none of them say there's a problem with it. And it happens asynchronously, so it doesn't hold up the entire operation. Let me get autoruns up here. Got VirusTotal. I should have reset this. So as you can see here, there's a VirusTotal column, and most of these are 0 out of 56. There's 56 antivirus engines that know about this file, and none of them say there's a problem. You can click on this hyperlink and bring up a web browser that'll go to VirusTotal and show here's all the antivirus engines, when it was scanned, when they last scanned that, and that there's nothing wrong. Let's see if I can find something. So here's another option you can do is hide VirusTotal clean entries, meaning if there's 0 detections from VirusTotal, don't show it in the screen. So here's the ones that either nothing was uploaded because there's file not found, or nothing has ever been submitted. They never saw that file hash. So by default, autoruns and the other tools that are integrated with with VirusTotal functionality, only send up a hash of the file rather than the entire file, which would take a lot of bandwidth. And there's some other reasons I discussed last year about why you might not want to upload everything up to VirusTotal, owned by Google, for various reasons. So here's one that shows 1 out of 56. And this is an internal version of Zoomit. This is a not yet released version of Zoomit. And there's one antivirus engine that says there's a problem. So we can click on that and see that there is an antivirus engine called Tencent, which might be a little bit more than it's actually worth, is my guess, that detects this Trojan in this file that I've got. So that's the VirusTotal integration. Oops. Get back to the slideshow here. Another thing that is really, really great is if you've ever used autoruns before and then decided, hey, I don't want to see the Microsoft entries or I don't want to see the Windows entries. If you wanted to make a change in that, you had to rescan everything. Now there's dynamic filters on there so that you can simply click and it captures everything now and just decides what to show you based on what you select here. There we go. There's the full set. Now I can hide the Windows entries, hide the Microsoft entries. Okay, so that's a whole lot faster than it used to be. Because it doesn't need to rescan. It rescans if you go to scan options and change something like I want to verify the file signatures. Then it's going to have to rescan. Or I want to check VirusTotal. That has to perform the operation again. Another thing that was added, this is really cool, this freeform text filter. So you can go in here into this filter box and type text in, like Bing, and it'll show you every entry that has the letter sequence BING in it. Cool? How many of you use autoruns? Okay, for the rest of you, autoruns is the single best tool that I have found for identifying what is hooked into my computer. Not what's running right this second, but what automatically starts when I log in. What is configured to run as a service? What are the drivers? Are they verified? Are the digital signatures verified? And where from? This is a great way to hunt down malware and things that really shouldn't be running on your system that you don't know about. So Autorun C is directly related to autoruns. Every time Mark recompiles autoruns, he also recompiles Autorun C. Autorun C is the command line version, the console utility that allows you to run this as a, you can use it in the batch file. And I use this a lot. I do a lot of analysis for cybersecurity, and I try to figure out what's on this box. I use Autorun C with a set of options to find out what's on here, is it digitally signed, and where is it, and so forth like that. So with the addition of VirusTotal, you can see here he's running out of alphabet because all the different options. To scan for the AppInit DLLs, you do -D. To look for printer monitor DLLs, you do -P. To verify digital signatures, -V. Not a lot of space. He adds the VirusTotal integration and wants to make it consistent with other tools like SigCheck that already have VirusTotal integration built in. At some point, you kind of have to go back and reset and say, okay, we're going to break backward compatibility. We're going to totally change up everything. Or, as we like to say, reimagined. We reimagined the Autorun C command line. So I love the word reimagined. Where did you first hear it? I'm going to get myself fired for this one, I swear. Anybody remember? Where did you first hear reimagine? We're going to reimagine Windows, right? Windows 8. That's the first time I ever heard the term. And I just, based on what I saw, okay, this is Windows reimagined, I just assume, not being a native English speaker perhaps, that reimagine means screw up royally beyond all recognition and usefulness. This is not being recorded, is that right? It's being streamed to the world. Excellent. This is the new autorun C command line syntax. So if you have any scripts that is using autorun C, you need to change your batch files as soon as you upgrade to a newer version. All the options what to scan for now follows -A. -A star means get everything. -A B means just look at the boot execute drivers. -A I is the Internet Explorer add-ons, etc. And then the things on the right describe here's what to do with that, right? Output it as CSV, as tab delimited CSV. Also capture the file hashes. Let me show you what some of that output looks like. This is what I like to do with it when let's do clip. Everybody familiar with the clip utility? Let me show you the file first. This is one I captured last night on this computer. Tab delimited CSV. Right? So tabs between all these. The reason I like tabs is because Excel likes tabs. Clip is a utility built into Windows that takes whatever it gets through standard input and copies it to the clipboard. Actually, before I run that, anybody remember this utility, the clipboard utility? I grabbed this off a copy of Server 2003. It's the last place it ever appeared. Right? This shows you what's on the clipboard. Nobody remembers this? Nobody here over the age of 25? Okay. So once it's on the clipboard, go into Excel, paste, format everything up, and here's all the data that's capturing in a form that you can sort and manipulate and filter. The timestamp of the target file, that's the target at entry point, the entry location, where this is configured, the name of the entry, whether it's enabled or not, the category. So you saw the tabs in auto runs showing all the different categories. That shows up here in this column, category column. Profile. So you can look at system-wide. You can also look for specific user accounts. So auto runs that are configured only for a specific user account. Chris Jackson logged onto my computer last night. I redirected his paycheck to my bank account. Don't tell him. The description, the publisher, whether it's verified. So this is where I go in and filter out everything that's signed by a publisher that I trust. And then I look at the rest of the stuff that's still remaining. Image path, the version of the executable, the actual launch string, the command line that it executes. Virus total detection. So you can go through here and find everything that's above 0. The link to the virus total report, and then the hashes, MD5, SHA-1, PE SHA-1, PE SHA-256. These are the authentic code hash outputs. So authentic code looks at the content areas of portable executable files, not at the filler areas. So the filler can be modified without changing the hash. And imp hash. This is something that Mark has been adding to some of the tools. So the reason hashes are valuable is you get a fixed length value that is almost guaranteed not to have come from any place other than the target executable that the hash was run against. So you can look at that and look up a database of hashes, and you can say, yes, we know about this file. It's this one. Okay. Imp hash is something that was developed recently in response to polymorphic malware. So malware, every single instance of the same file changes over time. So the hashes change. So hashes become useless for detecting the malware. Imp hash tries to look for certain areas of it, not the entire file, but just the import tables. And they find that when the import tables match a particular order and the hash comes out the same way, polymorphic versions of the same piece of malware end up with the same hash. So it's a method for hash detection. So that is what comes out of autorun C these days. Any questions? All good? So this is probably a little arcane, but does anybody here use RegJump? Anybody heard of it? So here's why Mark wrote RegJump. This is a utility. It's a little console utility. The problem with one of the many problems with regedit is that there's no good way to navigate to a specific location, right? You can't do like explore path name or anything like that with regedit. RegJump lets you do that. So it's a command line utility. It's had it out for a long time. You run it from the command line. You run RegJump, HKLM, software, Microsoft Windows. It'll open it up and then pump artificial keystrokes into regedit to navigate to that location. So what he recently added was the ability to also get it from the clipboard. So RegJump/C says, whatever's on the clipboard, jump to that location. That saves you the trouble of opening a command prompt and either typing or pasting the registry path into the command prompt. Let me show you that real quick. Let's see. I have, right. So here's a web page, and I'm just going to grab this registry path that's shown on here, copy it to the clipboard. RegJump, just run the shortcut, and navigates right there. This is kind of useful, I think. So you saw the UAC prompt. I meant to go through the rest of this animation first. So the thing about regedit is if you're a member of the administrators group, regedit is going to insist on running elevated. It always prompts you for elevation. If you're standard user, it doesn't. You can run it as standard user, but if you're admin, it always demands elevation. So you cannot send keystrokes, these artificial keystrokes, to an elevated program from a non-elevated program, so RegJump has to run elevated also if you're admin. So the way I do it when I use this is I create a shortcut with a path to RegJump, -C, go into the Advanced tab, check Run as Administrator. RU, this is another one that's probably a little arcane, but what the heck. So it's always useful to find out what the directory usage is, how much space is under program files, and in which subdirectories is that. So that's the DU command. RU does the same thing with the registry and finds locations in the registry that are bloated. Sometimes you have big performance problems because of registry bloat. So RU came out a few years ago since the release of the book, but not in the last year. What happened in the last year is Mark added a couple new features. One is if you output CSV, it'll report the last write time of the key, which I don't think any other, I think RegInit does, but it's really hard to get to find the last write time. And the other thing it can do is now you can open not just HKey local machine, HKey current user, etc. You can also point to a Hive file that's on disk. So you get a registry Hive that isn't loaded. You can load it with RU and analyze it and see where the bloat is without having to load it into the registry, and compress the file when it exits. This requires admin rights because it requires the backup and restore privileges. So let's see. Here is ntuser.dat 262K. So the command line syntax for RU, you can either specify an absolute path, HKey, a registry path, HKey local machine software, something or other, or -H in the name of the Hive file, and optionally a path inside that Hive file. So let's try that out. -H ntuser.dat. Okay, so this thing has 810 registry values in 368 keys, total size consuming 71,838 bytes. Do a directory listing again, and you can see that the file is now about half the size that it used to be. So if you need to compress registry hives, this is one way you can do it. Like I said, you can also dig in and see what those keys are. Do -L and go down one level. And here's the different subkeys and how much space is taken up inside each of those. And the final option was to specify a relative path within the hive. So let's look inside the control panel subkey and go down 2 levels below that. And you can see where things are taking up space within the control panel subkey of this otherwise unloaded hive. Is this useful for anybody outside of Microsoft customer service support? A few of you? Okay. The CSS guys are really happy with it. Well, 5 of them, to be precise. One thing I do need to point out is an unavoidable side effect of the registry load and unload APIs is that every time you do this, it creates these additional hidden files in the directory. So just be aware that if you run this, you may want to go clean those up later on. Oh, and the last write time. Let me, if you do, let's see, if you do CSV or tab delimited CSV, whoops, that's too much. I want something that's going to calculate a lot of stuff. Let's do HKey current user software sysinternals. Go down 1 level. You can see here last write time of each of these keys. So just like directories and files in the file system, there is a timestamp on registry keys, the last time the key was written. This can be really useful when you're trying to figure out how long ago did this change happen. It won't tell you what the change was or what value might have been modified or deleted, but it will tell you when the change was last made inside that registry key. That's, I think, really useful for 5 people in the world. Oh, the mic fell off. That's why it's rattling. Decided not to go with the official speaker shirt that has the hooks and things like that. So this is a very barren slide. So access check. Access check is the tool outside of Process Explorer, Process Monitor, and auto runs. This is the tool I run the most, particularly in cybersecurity. Access check lets you look at the permissions on not just files and directories and registry keys, but processes, kernel objects, service control manager entry points, or database entries. And last year I showed how we found a really sneaky backdoor on the production domain controller of a customer through a service control manager modification to the SNMP service entry, not the SNMP service itself, but the entry that allowed anyone in the domain to take over control of the domain controller. And in a really sneaky way that was hard to expose in any other way other than using access check. So access check lets you look for all these different types of things. It lets you look just for write permissions. It lets you look at effective permissions or the full security descriptor. And now it also lets you, filter out things like I'm not interested in permissions granted to the administrators or system or trusted installer because they've got what they've got anyway. I'm more concerned about people who shouldn't have access. And there's command line options to filter those out in access check. What was added this year is now it can also output SDDL. So here is access check showing the permissions on explorer.exe. We do a -Q to get rid of the banner. These are the effective permissions. Trusted installer has read and write. Admin system, built-in users, and application packages have read-only. -L lets you see the full security descriptor in detail. -L is SDDL. Security descriptor definition language. This is a concise, almost human-readable form, but it's text, and this is something that a lot of utilities and APIs can now consume and produce to document here's what the what the security descriptor is on this object in a way that can go in both directions. So this isn't just intended to be human readable. You can make modifications to this and plug it back in and change the security descriptor on an object using this concise ASCII text language. And so AccessCheck now supports that. The handle utility no longer requires administrative privileges. Yes. They're all really happy about this. Handle, by the way, for all of you who haven't heard of Handle before, how many of you have heard of the Handle utility? Okay, more than I expected. Handle is actually a predecessor to Process Explorer. How many of you have heard of Process Explorer? Okay, good. Process Explorer shows you all the processes and can show you a whole lot of information about all the processes on the computer. Handle is one of the predecessors to it. It's a command line utility that reports what processes have open handles to specific objects. And it has always required admin rights because it would load a kernel mode driver to go look through the system. Now, it doesn't require admin rights anymore. If it doesn't have admin rights, it only shows you what it has access to, which isn't going to be everything. It's not going to be able to show you, if you're running a standard user, it's not going to show you the handles owned by LSASS or the WinLogon process. But it can show you the stuff that's running as you. And that might be all you need. So, for example, I'm in this directory. I want to find out what has a handle open to anything with XFER anywhere in the handle name. It goes through the system, and it finds cmd.exe and handle itself. Right? I could also do handle, let's say OneDrive. Anything with the name OneDrive in the path, it can find anything that has this open. So this is a quick way to find out, like I'm getting this dialog saying something has this object open, you can't delete this file, you can't delete this directory because something has a handle open to it. This is a quick way, short of running Process Explorer, which is another good way to do it, of finding out what that might be so that you can go take care of that process. Sysmon, I did mention this. This is a really unique thing in the canon of the sysinternals utilities. It's unlike every other one. Most of them are designed for somewhat interactive diagnosis and troubleshooting. You're going to run the tool and see the output. You're going to run the tool. You're not going to be able to do anything with the results until it's done completing its work. Sysmon is designed to track intruder activity throughout your network. All right, I love this picture. Let me explain what's going on in here. So this is the Great Leader, and the device in the upper right is pointed straight at Sony Pictures. And the gentleman to the left of the Great Leader is explaining to the Great Leader, yes, that is a wonderful idea, but you cannot put the 8 of clubs on the Jack of diamonds. And these other guys are smiling because they're thinking, buddy, you're going to get shot for that. You should have just made it work. So, tracking intruder activity. Let me go through a little bit more and talk about the different trade-offs. So this is designed for long-term headless operation throughout your environment. No other sysinternals utility has been designed to operate like this. Process Monitor. It works a little bit like Process Monitor in the sense that the kernel driver that captures all the stuff works the same way as Process Monitor. So why not use Process Monitor to track all this activity? A few different reasons. One, Process Monitor captures a ton of information, most of which is not going to be relevant to finding what the intruders are doing. And second of all, when Process Monitor is running, you can't see the results until Process Monitor is done monitoring and closes the file cleanly. And that's not particularly helpful here. So Sysmon does it differently. It has a driver that captures a subset of events that are particularly interesting or potentially interesting when tracking bad guy activity. Then there's a sysmon service which consumes that data, adds some additional contextual information to it, and then writes it to an event log, a Windows event log, rather than to a PML or some other proprietary binary file. It's writing it to something that Windows already provides. The benefit here is once it's written to the event log, you can do something with it immediately. You can view it and alert on it right away. You can use Windows event forwarding to capture this information and then send it to a central collection point, an SIEM, for example, and alert on stuff in almost real time when you see things that shouldn't be happening on your network. So what events does sysmon track? First of all, every time a process is created, it captures a bunch of information, including the image path, the image path of the executable, the command line, the current directory, what user, what terminal session ID it was in, what integrity level it was running at, the hashes, one or more hashes of the executable, and you can specify SHA-1, SHA-256, MPASH, MD5, so you can match that up against databases of known file hashes. It also captures information about the parent process, including the image and the original command line of the executable that started this process. I'm going to come back to process GUID in a little bit. That's going to be really useful for collating information about processes or events relating to a specific process. But I'll come back to that. Process terminated. Every time a process exits, it captures the image, the process ID, and again, the process GUID for that process. And of course, also the time when it happened. And let me point out, sequence number and UTC time. UTC time is down to, the millisecond granularity. The reason sequence number was added, this is new, sequence number was added in sysmon version 3. The reason that's added is you may have multiple events within a single, with the same reported UTC time. This allows you to put those in proper order. So sequence number gets restarted every time the service is restarted. So it's not going to be guaranteed unique anywhere, but within a certain UTC time, it can help you identify the actual order that events occurred. Driver loaded. Every time a kernel mode driver is loaded, it will capture the full path to it, the hashes for the file, whether it's signed and signed by whom. One thing to point out here is the driver captures when a kernel mode driver is loaded, the sysmon driver will capture that information. It will get the image path of that driver. The service is what figures out what the hashes are and does the signature verification. If the driver file disappears after the load and before the service can get to it, the hashes and the signature information will not be there because it happened that quickly. And so it'll say signed false, which is not actually possible on 64-bit Windows, but that's the reason you might see that. The reason for this is, of course, a lot of malware is going to bring kernel mode drivers. So seeing kernel mode drivers come into your environment, you may want to take a look at what those are and look for who signed them and are you expecting to see those in here. Image load. So anytime a process maps a DLL or other file into its address space, you can capture information about that. By default, because there's so many of these events, sysmon does not capture these by default. But what you get is the name of the executable and the name of the image that's being loaded in. In this example, search filter host.exe is loading GDI32. You get the hashes, again, of the target image that's being loaded and signature and hash information. File creation time changed. So sometimes malware, when it gets on a system, will drop a file and then change the timestamp on it to make it look legit. Like drop a file into system32 and then change the timestamp of that file to match the operating system file. So you do a directory listing, it seems a little less out of the ordinary. So every time sysmon captures one of these events, it writes it to the sysmon event log. Now, there's a lot of legitimate reasons why file timestamps might get changed, and here's an example right here. Anytime you extract something from a zip file or other type of archive, as far as the file system is concerned, when you do the extract, you're creating a new file on disk. So it's going to get a timestamp assigned by the file system based on the current time when you extracted the file. Then the zip program or Explorer, whatever is doing the extract, is going to set the timestamp to what was in the archive, right? Because that's normally what you're going to want. So there are legitimate uses for this, but this can help you identify. So what you need to do here is look for, where is this happening and does that make sense? If it's something in System32 or the Windows directory or the drivers directory, that I'm going to be concerned about. If it's in the user profile, maybe not. Anytime a network connection is established, a TCP or UDP, you can log an event. This is also, because there's a lot of this, not logged by default, but you can turn this on. So this will capture what process is doing it, whether it's TCP or UDP, whether it's IPv6 or IPv4, the source and destination. Here, though, source and destination is actually misleading terminology. It probably should have been local and remote. The source here is always the local machine, even if the remote system is the one that initiated. So that's where the initiated value, right below protocol, is true or false, depending on whether it was initiated from here or received from here, received to here. You get the destination port number, and if there's a name associated with that port number, it'll capture that as well. Now, if you have a network connection outbound from your machine to RussianCriminalOrganization.ru, and then an upload of 30 gig of data, over that one TCP connection, you'll get one event. This is only monitoring the initial creation of the connection, not the ongoing activity. This is not a replacement for Wireshark or Netmon or something like that. With UDP, because there is no connection, every single event is a unique event, right? And you could flood the log with that. So the way they avoid too much noise in the log is when they see an event that's new, they'll put it in. Subsequent events, subsequent UDP events over the next 15 minutes with all the same information, the same source and destination, those will get ignored for 15 minutes. So if you have 30 gig going up over UDP, you'll only see an event every 15 minutes instead of continually. Sysmon version 3 just added this new one, Create Remote Thread. Create Remote Thread is an API that lets one process inject code into another process. Assuming it has the rights to control that process, it can tell the other process, run this code. Okay? There are legitimate uses for it. There's also a lot of malware that uses it, and I've got an example right here. Windows Credential Editor injecting code into lsas.exe. But there's a lot of legitimate use as well, so what you need to do is look for the source and target image and base it on that. But there are both legitimate and evil uses for this API. This is new, like I said, in Sysmon version 3. The last event that it captures is whenever the Sysmon service starts or stops. It just writes that to the event log. Installing and configuring Sysmon. It's very simple. Even though this is one of those things that you install and leave running for a long time, there's still no MSI. There's still no setup.exe per se. Sysmon.exe, options, and it runs. Okay, so to install the initial install sysmon-i and then specify the options, which are optional. I always recommend doing except EULA on this command line because you will have to, it will pop the dialog if you don't and you haven't run this before. It's just one of those things that we had to deal with after the acquisition from little sysinternals, winternals to big Microsoft where we employ more lawyers than anything else. So there's the end user license agreement. So if you're doing particularly an unattended install, you definitely want to do this. Otherwise, it's going to pop a dialog where no one can click on it. To change the configuration, the exact same command line options hold. You just use -C. And to just view the configuration, sysmon-c without options, it'll just tell you here's how it's configured right now. To read events, so it has its own custom event log, which I'll show you in a moment. If you want to read an event log without actually installing sysmon and having the driver capturing events and things like that, sysmon-m will install or register the sysmon event log manifest so that you can view the event log and it can translate all the information in that event log. And uninstall is simply sysmon-u. The command line options are either specify a configuration file, which is an XML file, which I'll show you in a moment. -H, you can specify hashes. By default, it'll just do SHA-1. If you can specify more than that. You can specify each of these with a comma between them and no space, including imp hash. If you do -H*, it'll capture all 4 of those. Network events, not captured by default. -N says capture them. If you only want to capture events for a specific process or set of processes, you list those on the command line. I'm only interested in network events involving iexplore.exe. Okay, -N, iexplore.exe. Similarly, image load, you're only interested in DLLs being loaded by a particular process like Explorer, Internet Explorer, LSASS. -L loads all of them. -L and name the processes with commas between them will capture events, image load events, only for those processes. When that particular process loads DLL, that will get logged. For much more granular control, you can specify this XML, an XML file that follows this schema. Specify the hash algorithms here. Event filtering is where it gets really interesting. You can get very, very granular. So here you have the type of event, like driver load, and you say whether you want to include or exclude based on the criteria that you specify. So in this example, driver load on match equals exclude means capture all the driver load events except the type that I'm about to specify. And within that, signature contains Microsoft or signature contains Windows. So this will capture all driver load events except for drivers that have the name Microsoft or Windows in the digital signature. The next one shows an example of using onMatch equals include. OnMatch equals include means include only the ones that I specify. And in this particular case, process terminate onMatch include close the element says include nothing. So this basically turns off the capture of process terminate events. So you can do that with all the different types of events if you want. Network connect, this is another example of include. Only capture network connection events where the destination port is 443. So here's the event log. It captures it to a custom event log under Applications and Services Logs, Microsoft, Windows, Sysmon, operational. Okay, and you can do all kinds of filtering here. The names of these also tell you what rules you can use, the rule names to use in the XML config file. So image loaded is the task category. Image load is the element name you would use in a config file if you wanted to configure how image loads are captured. What I like to do when I'm looking at this stuff is I really like PowerShell. So like I said, you can analyze these events as soon as they hit the event log. There's a few different ways to capture that locally. There's the wevtutil command, which is a Windows console command. And then there's the getWin event commandlet in PowerShell. And this is how you do it. Hopefully, no, it's not going to work for me. GetWin event log name Microsoft-Windows-sysmon/operational. And I'm capturing those into a collection of events. And you can do events and then filter on something like ID equals 8, which would be the create remote thread events. Okay, there's a bunch of those. Let's see what let's look at the first one. Okay, here's all the different, so you can figure out what to do just based on this kind of experimentation. Let me grab that message by itself. Okay, and this can also tell you, see, the dot message is here's the rendered text with all the the formatting and everything applied. If you want to do something with the values itself, I do not recommend trying to parse through this. I recommend going through the properties instead. These are going to show the properties in order. So property 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So property 4 is going to be the source image. Property 7 is going to be the target image. So if I do that and then output properties 4 value, and then I wish Jeffrey Snover was on this stage right before me, and if he were here, he would make this look a lot more intelligent. I'm not that good at this. And then properties 7 value. Okay, here are the sources, and these are the targets. So here's WCE targeting LSASS. So you can do a whole lot with this and using PowerShell. Any questions about Sysmon? I've seen it starting to get deployed in large environments. There's a lot of companies that are getting really excited about the ability to see what's going on in their network using this kind of technology. Pretty cool? All right. You know what? Let me show you one other thing. This is probably not that important to most people. Have you ever seen protected processes? Protected processes are things that we've kind of developed during the Vista timeframe, and we've kind of enhanced it since then. A protected process, even if you have admin rights and debug privilege, you're very constrained into what you can get out of a protected process. This is for DRM. It's for to protect antivirus. To protect, you can do that with LSASS, starting with Windows 8.1 and 2012 R2. You can turn LSASS into a protected process, which can help block access from things like WCE and Mimikatz. So there hasn't been a good way to see what those are until latest version of Process Explorer. Turn on the protection column, and it'll show you what the protected processes are and what the protection type is. This is very lightly documented in the internet, but you can see here, here's MSMPEng, the anti-malware service executable. Here's CSRSS is another protected process. That might be useful for 2 or 3 of you, I hope. So the big question has to be, what's the new book cover going to look like? So let me show you what I came up with a few years ago. We were looking at, we realized that having a big name author on the cover of your book helps sell books. And I was really excited about this. I came up with the idea of J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, and modifying one of her books to do this. And I put it out there, and TechEd 2010 or 11 or 12 or something like that. It was just a joke, right? Well, J.K. Rowling found out about it, and she contacted us, and this was a big surprise. I did not know. In the years before she wrote Harry Potter, she was quite the turbo nerd, and she actually had been to TechEd and had seen Mark speak. And she contacted us and said, "This is absolutely brilliant. I love it. We must make this happen." We're like, yeah, we would love to. And we started moving forward on it. And then Mark Russinovich scuttles the entire thing by insisting that his name had to be in a bigger font than hers. So it won't be this. Sorry. Sysinternals resources is the end of the session. I'm going to give you a little bit of time back because this is the end of the day. But and this deck has not been posted yet. I will make sure it gets to the SilverFox people and be on the website. The Sysinternals website, the Sysinternals blog, which I recommend subscribing to so you can know when the updates come out. Mark's blog, which he updates every now and again. The app install recorder that I mentioned earlier that I talked about last year is now on my blog. That's the first link on this page, blogs.msdn.com, Aaron_Margosis. Andrew Richards has a bunch of great stuff. His Defrag Tools show on Channel 9 is a great one for you deep dive nerd types. And that's what we've got. Let me back that up so you can take pictures of that. If there's any questions, the mics are hopefully open. Really appreciate your coming. I hope you got something out of this. I look forward to seeing you again at future events, whatever they name them.